Hey everyone, welcome back. We're about to kick off another deep dive, and today we're looking at how the courage to speak, even imperfectly,
Yeah.
can lead to some really incredible experiences.
Right.
And to illustrate that point,
Okay.
we're going to take a look at the story of Matthias, a Swedish backpacker who journeyed through Brazil
Wow.
with limited Portuguese and, let's say, adventurous English.
That's so interesting because, Matthias really kind of flips the script on how we often think about learning a language.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to get bogged down with, all the grammar rules and avoiding mistakes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And we forget that language is really all about connection at its core.
I think you're so right. And Matthias' story is like the perfect example of that.
Mm-hmm.
So just picture this. Okay, he's in this like bustling Amazonian market.
Oh, wow.
He's craving bananas, but he can't for the life of him remember the Portuguese word.
Oh, I've been there.
Right. I think a lot of us would just give up right there.
Totally.
Like the fear of messing up could be so paralyzing.
Yeah.
But not Matthias. He did something so clever.
Oh, really? What did he do?
Instead of getting flustered,
Okay.
he points at an orange. He says, not this, but yellow long monkey eat.
Oh, my gosh. That's brilliant.
Right.
I love that.
And I bet he got a good laugh, too.
Oh, I'm sure it did.
Yeah.
The vendor probably burst out laughing and understood right away.
Exactly.
Shout a banana.
It just goes to show you that, a little creativity
Yeah.
and humor can get you so much further as perfect grammar.
Totally.
It's almost like a real-life game of charades.
Right.
It makes you realize that communication is so much more than just words.
It really is. We use facial expressions, gestures, tone of voice.
Right.
All of these things play a role in conveying meaning.
And, for Matthias, his willingness to just try,
Yeah.
even if it sounded a little unconventional,
Uh-huh.
that was the key.
It's a good reminder for all of us to not let the fear of being imperfect stop us from communicating.
Exactly. Like it's not about passing a language test.
Right.
It's about connecting with another human being. And I think that's what makes his journey so inspiring.
I agree.
He might not have been fluent in Portuguese,
Okay.
but he was fluent in human connection.
I love that fluent in human connection. That's such a powerful way to put it.
Right?
And it really gets to the heart of successful communication.
Yeah.
It's that genuine desire to connect, to share, to understand, even if it means making a few mistakes along the way.
So it wasn't just about getting those bananas, right?
Right.
It was about that interaction, that shared moment of laughter
Yeah.
and understanding that transcended the language barrier.
I see what I mean.
Almost makes you wonder if being too focused on perfection
Yeah.
actually prevents us from having those genuine interactions.
That's a great point. And, it makes me think about how often we overthink things in our own lives, especially when it comes to language. Like, remember Javier?
Javier.
He spent years perfecting his English in a classroom.
Oh, yeah?
But when he actually went to London,
What happened with him? Remind me.
well, he had this incredible vocabulary and impeccable grammar,
Okay.
but he really struggled to actually use it in real-life situations.
Huh.
He was so fixated on saying everything perfectly
Okay.
that he ended up sounding a little robotic.
Oh, no, I think I see where this is going.
So, for example, there was this one time he was trying to order tea with milk at a cafe,
Okay.
which is a pretty straightforward interaction, you would think.
Yeah.
But instead of just simply saying, tea with milk, please,
Yeah.
he launched into this long-winded explanation.
Oh, no. What did he say?
It was something like, I would like to request a hot beverage, preferably of the Pamelia sinensis variety,
Oh, gosh.
with the addition of bovine mammary secretion.
Bovine mammary secretion. Who talks like that?
I know, the poor barista was totally bewildered.
Oh, my goodness.
But it highlights how our obsession with perfect grammar can sometimes backfire.
Yeah.
I mean, he was speaking correct English, but it wasn't appropriate for the context at all.
It's like wearing a tuxedo to a barbecue.
Exactly, a perfect analogy.
So I guess what you're saying is that there's a difference between correct language and effective language.
Yes.
And sometimes focusing too much on one can really undermine the other.
Absolutely. There's this concept in linguistics called register,
Okay.
which basically means the level of formality in language.
Uh-huh.
And using the right register for the situation is super important for effective communication.
So it's about reading the room.
Exactly.
So I guess Javier's story is kind of a cautionary tale then.
Yeah, in a way.
Shows us that just because you have perfect grammar
Right.
doesn't mean you're a good communicator.
Well, I think it's a bit more nuanced than that.
Okay.
Javier's knowledge wasn't useless. It's just that it needed to be, adapted to a real-world setting.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine if he were writing a research paper or something.
Oh, yeah.
That precise language would actually be a real asset.
Right.
But for casual, everyday conversation, it can be a little much.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So it's not about throwing grammar rules out the window completely.
No.
It's more about knowing when and how to apply them.
Right.
Being flexible and adaptable like Matthias with his bananas.
Speaking of adaptability, let's talk about Zara.
Oh, yeah.
Now, her English wasn't perfect,
Okay.
but she spoke with such confidence and a real willingness to learn.
Oh, Zara. Yeah, she was the one who navigated New York City.
Exactly.
Like a total pro.
Like a native.
Despite having what some people might call imperfect English.
Right, exactly. Her story shows us that attitude and a can-do spirit can be just as important as grammatical accuracy.
I love that.
She wasn't afraid to make mistakes, use gestures,
Yeah.
even invent words when she needed to.
Wow.
And guess what? She totally thrived in one of the most linguistically diverse cities in the world.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
It really challenges that idea that you need to be perfectly fluent to communicate effectively.
Totally.
It seems like confidence and a willingness to learn can really take you far.
Absolutely. It reminds us that communication at its core is about getting your meaning across whatever it takes. It's about connecting with others, sharing experiences, and building bridges, even when there are language differences.
And you know what this makes me think about? How babies learn language?
Oh, yeah. How so? I mean, they don't start off by memorizing grammar rules or anything like that. It's more of this, like, messy, playful kind of trial and error process. They imitate, they make a ton of mistakes.
Yeah.
But through all that, they slowly figure out how language works.
It's true. We often put so much pressure on ourselves to be perfect from the get-go.
Right.
But babies, they show us that making mistakes is actually like a key part of learning.
Absolutely. It's like, imagine if a baby was afraid to Bible.
Right.
Just because they weren't getting the words right. They'd never learned to speak.
It's true.
And that's a lesson that we can apply to learning anything new, really, whether it's an instrument, cooking a new dish, or speaking a foreign language.
Right.
Embracing those early stumbles, those mistakes.
Yeah.
That's what helps us grow and improve.
So it's not about avoiding mistakes altogether.
Right.
It's about seeing them as like stepping stones.
Exactly.
On the path to fluency.
Totally.
And speaking of stepping stones, the story of Mr. Mao really highlights that it's never too late to start this journey.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he began learning English at 60.
Mr. Mao's story is incredible.
It is.
He really proves that age is not a barrier to fluency.
Right.
And that the desire to connect can be such a powerful motivator.
I'm curious, what were some of the challenges he faced?
Yeah.
Learning a language later in life, I imagine, is pretty different from like a child picking up their native language.
Oh, absolutely. You're right. For adults, there can be that extra layer of self-consciousness that kids just don't have.
Yeah.
We're more aware of making mistakes.
Yeah.
Sometimes that can hold us back.
So how did he overcome that?
Well, he had this amazing mindset.
Okay.
He knew that perfection wasn't the goal, communication was. He focused on being understood, even if his pronunciation or his grammar wasn't perfect.
So he prioritized progress over perfection.
Exactly.
I think that's such a valuable lesson for anyone learning a new skill, not just language.
Yeah.
We tend to get caught up in being perfect right away,
Yeah, we do.
and that could be so discouraging.
It's like we see these polished, effortless performances, whether it's a musician or someone speaking the foreign language fluently, and we forget about all the hours of practice and all the mistakes that they made along the way.
We're comparing ourselves to like the finished product
Right.
without acknowledging the whole process that led to it.
Exactly. And Mr. Mao, he embraced the whole process.
Yeah.
He wasn't afraid to make mistakes or to sound silly. You know, he stumbled, but he kept going.
Yeah.
And his persistence paid off.
That's great.
Within a year, he was able to travel to Australia, a lifelong dream of his, and he was able to communicate,
That's amazing.
order food, ask for directions, even make new friends.
That's so inspiring. And it just reinforces that it's not about reaching some level of perfection.
Right.
It's about having the language skills to connect with people.
Yeah.
And to experience new things and to just live a richer life.
Totally.
It's like his English wasn't perfect, but it was enough.
I love that word, enough.
Right.
It really changes the perspective. It's not about being perfect. It's about being enough to connect with the world around you.
And it's interesting how both Matthias and Mr. Mao's stories really highlight the importance of confidence in successful communication. They weren't afraid to put themselves out there to speak up, even when they made mistakes.
Exactly.
It's like that saying, done is better than perfect.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get so caught up in getting things exactly right
Right.
that we never actually do anything.
I agree. And I think Zora's story really fits in here, too.
Yeah.
She may not have had perfect grammar,
right,
but her confidence and her willingness to adapt allowed her to thrive. It was like those qualities became her fluency.
So confidence, adaptability, a willingness to make mistakes.
Yeah.
These are all recurring themes.
They are.
These stories, almost like they're just as important as vocabulary and grammar when it comes to communicating effectively.
Absolutely. And this reminds me of another fascinating aspect of language learning.
Okay, what's that?
It's not just about the individual. It's about the people you're communicating with.
What do you mean?
Well, communication is a two-way street.
Right.
It's not just about how well you speak.
Okay.
It's also about how receptive the other person is, how willing they are to meet you halfway.
That's interesting. So even if you make mistakes, even if you're not perfectly fluent, if the other person is open and understanding, communication can still happen.
Exactly. And that's where things like empathy and cultural awareness come into play.
I see what you mean.
Being able to understand where someone's coming from, even if their language is different from yours, can make a huge difference.
So it's not just about speaking correctly. It's about speaking with sensitivity and awareness.
Totally.
And I guess that's where the connection part really comes in.
Exactly.
About building bridges and finding common ground. Even when there are those linguistic differences.
Beautifully said. I think it's a wonderful reminder that language at its core is a tool for human connection. It's about bridging cultural divides, sharing experiences and stories, and building relationships.
And sometimes those connections happen in the most unexpected ways.
Totally.
Like Matthias and his banana incident. It wasn't about perfect Portuguese. It was about that shared moment of laughter and understanding.
Exactly. It's a reminder that we shouldn't let the fear of being imperfect stop us from engaging with the world around us. Whether it's learning a new language, trying a new hobby, or just striking up a conversation with someone new. The first step is always the hardest, but it's also the most rewarding.
It is.
And you know what? All these stories, they bring up a really interesting question.
What's that?
It's about this idea of fluency itself. Like, what does it actually mean to be fluent in a language? Is it about, like, speaking perfectly, never making any mistakes? Or is it something more than that?
That is a really good question. And I think so often we do equate fluency with perfection. Which can be a pretty intimidating standard, especially where you're just starting out.
Right. It can make us lose sight of the real purpose of language, you know, which is to communicate and connect and share. So maybe instead of striving for this like perfect fluency, we should be aiming for more of a functional fluency.
What do you mean by functional fluency?
So it's about having enough language skills to function well in different situations. Like being able to order food, ask for directions, have a basic conversation. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's enough to get by, to connect with people, and to experience the world in a new way.
I like that a lot. It takes the pressure off of sounding like a native speaker. And puts the focus on actually using your language skills.
Exactly.
It's kind of like you don't need to be a master chef to cook a delicious meal.
You just need to know the basics and be willing to experiment.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the more comfortable and confident you become.
Absolutely. And that confidence can make all the difference in how you communicate.
Like confidence is its own form of fluency almost.
It is.
You know, it gives you that ability to speak up, to take risks, and to not worry about making mistakes. And I think we see that in all the stories we talked about today.
We do.
Mitziar, Mr. Mao. They all had that willingness to just go for it.
Put themselves out there.
Even if they weren't perfectly fluent.
Exactly.
And it was that courage, that willingness to put themselves out there that allowed them to connect with others and to have these amazing experiences. And to really broaden their understanding of the world.
It really shows that fluency isn't about reaching some level of perfection. It's about having the courage to use the language skills you have, no matter how imperfect, to engage with the world around you.
That's a great way to put it, and that is a really powerful message for our listeners today.
It is.
Don't let the fear of not being perfect stop you from learning a language. Embrace the journey, celebrate the progress, and most importantly, have fun.
Have fun.
And who knows, maybe you'll even have your own banana incident.
You never know.
That turns into a great memory.
Exactly.
Just remember, language is a tool for connection. For bridging cultural divides, for sharing stories.
Absolutely.
It's not a test you have to pass or a competition you have to win.
It's about expressing yourself, connecting with others, and embracing the beauty of human communication.
So go out there and speak. Don't let the fear of making mistakes hold you back. Embrace the journey. And most importantly, have fun. Right?